All right, welcome in. This is episode 3 of the Sandcrawler, and today, oh my goodness, folks, do we have an episode for you. For the first time in ever, um, even more so than the great song from Frozen, Jeff and I have a disagreement, a categorical disagreement over a piece of Star Wars content recently. I bet you can guess what one it is based on the time that we're doing this episode, but we'll get into that. After that, we're going to hit the Bad Batch, just generally touch on it, kind of our general thoughts. We haven't done, not even in volume 1, have we done an episode on Bad Batch. So we're going to hit it, not talk about just like the most recent episodes or anything like that, but just an overview of the show as a whole. Then we're going to get into Imperial Interdictors as part of our Essential Guide series. And finally, we're going to hit the giveaway. Still doing the giveaway. I was able to get a pretty good deal on eBay for a bunch of these Micro Machine Sandcrawlers. I bought a ton. So much so that the seller actually sent me a message and was like, "Dude, I'm curious. What do you need this many Sandcrawlers for?" And so I kindly told him to, first of all, listen to our show. So if you're listening, heads up, props, thank you. But secondly, that we were doing the giveaway, and so he wished us luck. So having said that, Jeff, anything before we get into the not first ever, but maybe first ever categorical dispute on Star Wars content? Anything that you want to do at the overview point?
I think just to let our viewers know and our listeners know, you're going down. So that would be my message, because this is Gotti Ward, Fraser Ali. This is, Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield. Daniel and I feel very strongly about what has happened, and we'll jump into it here momentarily. But I'm going to die on these hills, and I don't know if you are too, but it's worth discussing.
So I feel pretty strongly. So our friendship's not at stake, but I don't know. By the end of it, it might come into jeopardy. So we'll see. Mando Season 3, Episode 4 marks a critical juncture in the Star Wars fandom for Jeff and Daniel. I freaking loved this episode from start to finish. I was enthralled with this episode from start to finish. I was sitting on the edge of my seat and I was tuning things out. I wasn't looking at my phone. I wasn't trying to take notes for this call or for this podcast. I call Jeff all the time and we talk Star Wars. Then we do a podcast about Star Wars. And then when we finish the podcast, we text each other about Star Wars. So it all kind of jives together. I didn't do any of that. I sat on the edge of my seat, leaning forward, eyes wide open, trying to take in as much of this episode from start to finish as I possibly could. And it was awesome. I actually think it was the best episode of The Mandalorian from start to finish that we have seen in its short run. There have been cooler moments. I think that Luke Skywalker showing up was a cooler moment in Star Wars history, really, but also for the show. And there's probably a few others that I can't think of right now. But from start to finish, this was my favorite episode. I would give it a 9.5. There was a little bit of cheese in it that cost it the perfect score. But I do think that a 9.5 is the highest I've ever given individual show. So, Jeff, rebuttal. First negative, constructive.
Yeah, no, that's all good. I wouldn't go so far as to give this episode like an F or an F minus, because that's not fair. And I think, all kidding aside, we've talked about it. I do really like The Mandalorian. I like generally, I would say I love what the show has done for Star Wars and what our fandom is. So again, I'm not just nitpicking this for the sake of nitpicking. My critique, and I would probably rate this one in like the low 60%. Like nowadays, I guess it's like a D minus, maybe. I don't know, somewhere in there. The reason is
because I thought you were going to go lower. So maybe I pumped it up a little bit, but still we're going to have a healthy debate.
I'll be scattered throughout this. So let me start with the positive, because we can probably find some common ground there. And I know we'll talk about it a little bit later in the show too. But one thing I did really enjoy was the flashback that Grogu had regarding Order 66, his, escape from the Jedi Temple. A cool cameo, like I said, that we'll talk about here in a little bit. I enjoy that. And I think the background of Grogu is obviously what's intentionally been teased throughout the show. And so to learn more and to see it, and also to kind of revisit that era of Star Wars, was really cool. And I have, again, no critique there. I thought it was well done and well executed. And again, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Here's my problem with this episode. And I'm just going to make even a broader statement, generally how I feel about the entirety of this season. I don't really understand where this show is going, and I'm disappointed by its vapidity relative to how awesome I thought the first and second seasons of Mando have been. I expressed in our first ever volume of this, which we'll eventually publish, my concern following the appearance of Luke Skywalker in the infamous scene where it's again like him going through the hallway, that by doing that, you jump the shark a little bit with Star Wars. Now you have put Luke and now subsequently Ahsoka out there into the ether. And it's really difficult for me personally as a fan to separate categorically a narrative that I don't think, as it pertains to this particular era in Star Wars, doesn't make me really just exclusively interested in the story of the main characters. And I'm not going to expound on this too much, but I am a strong and fervent believer that when Disney decided to wipe away the Legends canon, what they really did, which I'm not going to debate this today, they've wiped away 95% of the character biographies of all characters that we know, right? So
an objective, fair statement to make. No opinions on it, but an objective, fair statement. Yes.
So the problem with that then is that if the focus with the sequel trilogy was 35 years after the original trilogy, more or less, and you were going to focus on those characters, the lack of attention paid to the main characters, one could argue then, and I would sort of buy it, would make sense. They're making way for a new generation. These people are geriatric. It is what it is. The problem is that when you root a show like the Mando in the era of our main characters, in the quote unquote original trilogy era, but then you double down by giving us not just fan service, but a narrative that is whose red thread is directly tied to Luke Skywalker and the future of the Jedi. After a while, it becomes very hard for me to care about really insignificant plot lines and side missions and side quests. Does that work in a comic book format? Absolutely. Does it work when you're playing it as a video game? Sure. But this episode in particular really felt like I was playing Mandalorian Redemption 2, right? Every sequence is now a side mission to unlock armor. It's a side mission to level up the character. Grogu got a Beskar chest plate. He's level 3 Grogu now, even though he's wearing the Frodo Mithril armor already. It seems redundant.
It's pretty good to get level 3 Grogu though. He is strong. He unlocks an extra slot for his abilities at that point.
That's fair, but it's more that it's just I don't know how much more exposition I need to hear from the armorer about the importance of Mandalore and armor and its meaning. We've beat that horse, and I start to wonder how much of this is a time suck. The last thing I'll say is I rolled a lot during this episode. I know that they have a whole thing with, when I say they, I mean Favreau and Filoni, they love the Harry Harryhausen or whatever, Clash of the Titans, claymation, old stuff. I get what they were hearkening back to. I guarantee they'll talk about it in the making of at the end of the season, where they go up to the big bird's nest and they're in there and it's like a giant pterodactyl that they're fighting. One, I mean, bringing the baby birds back at the end just felt like the most eye-rolly Disney thing. Ugh, okay.
That's what cost it the 10 for me. That's what cost it the 10 right there.
These are Mandalorians. They're Spartans. They're not these empathetic, neighborhood warriors. And I'm not going to go through each piece of critique because I want you to respond. But I guess the last thing I would just say on that point is that these sort of things in no way really like drive the plot forward. Does Grogu's backstory and some of that like mental exposition? Yeah, absolutely. And guess what? That's just tying you further to his path along the Force and how he will ultimately interact in the context of a new Jedi Order of some kind, right? Or what his place in the galaxy is. I just felt like, I watched these sequences and I actually was the opposite of you. I got on my phone because I have been hit over the head so many times through the Marvel Cinematic Universe and every other Jerry Bruckheimer, Michael Bay film where I watch a CGI sequence while these guys free fall through the air and there's a giant winged monster. And it's like, yeah, guys, I mean, I'm not saying that's not cool, but I've seen this 550 times already. And more importantly, there's not going to be like any consequences. Nobody's going to die. Like nobody's going to get hurt. So again, I'll stop there, but I just felt like the episode was vapid, and the reason I'm upset by it is like it doesn't have to be. That's the thing. Like these guys are immensely talented. Their show's awesome. I don't know why we're focused in these last two episodes, which are, by the way, totally disconnected narratively, with like these meandering side missions. Yeah, I'll stop there.
So I get it. And I'm not trying to boil down your argument, but I think one of the themes of it is this idea that they're almost wasting time. And what's the point if we've seen this kind of thing before? They've made their point on what they've displayed, and so they're not furthering the story. I'm okay with that, to be honest. The argument when I make it, because I've made the same argument. I've been on your side of that argument before in other contexts. I think that argument requires, however, the idea that how much time is left, how many episodes there are, and to an extent you do, right? We know that these are 8-episode seasons, and we know that was episode 4, so we've only got 4, so we know we have almost certainly we have 4 hours of content or less left. But how many seasons? How do these characters play into the broader universe that's going to be maybe shared? I gave up on the MCU a long time ago. Thanos was it for me. I called it quits after that. I don't really watch the shows. I can't keep up with it. So I haven't been totally berated with all of that stuff yet. But that for me is okay. So what I got with this episode was it was like a video game in a good way for me. It's almost like the opening act of a video game. You have a cut scene where you see all of the people training on the beach. They're shooting weapons. What's that Marine movie with Jake Gyllenhaal in one of the weigh-ins? It reminded me when they're like, oh man, I didn't even get to shoot my guns, when they're partying because they're leaving the next day and they all just started shooting their guns up in the air for no reason.
I think that's Jarhead.
That's the one. And so it reminded me of that, but as a video game, you cut into it and then you select to take the training option where you kind of learn the basic functions of your character. So that's them choosing their weapons and fighting and figuring that out. And then to set the story further along, you have a huge beast, and this is your first mission. It picks up a child that you have to go hunt down. What I would have liked to have seen, and where I think that the episode could have done better, was this one was like 33 minutes and the previous one was like almost an hour. I would have loved to have seen a campfire story to expand some lore, kind of like Grogu got. Filoni came from Avatar, The Last Airbender, a show that I thought was cool before everyone else did. I remember trying to get you to watch it when new episodes were still coming out like 20 years ago. So
that's right.
yeah, I got the cred on Avatar and Cabbage Man, my favorite side character. And so one of my favorite episodes from the first season, when Filoni was still around and was involved with it, had dual background stories to intertwine two main characters. They had Aang, who's like the main protagonist, and it had his backstory of how he froze himself and why he didn't want to be the Avatar, etc. And then it had Zuko, the main, at the time, antagonist, had his background about how he was banished from the Fire Islands and all. Oh my God, I'm blanking on it, but basically the Fire Lord banished him and all that. So his history behind that. And so I would have loved to have seen the duality with Grogu, getting his background and then some other character. Maybe it makes sense that it would be either heavy infantry or Bo-Katan. Just see something, just a little bit more background from them telling the story. Maybe Bo-Katan, while she's eating at the fire, like reflects on her own history, and that's how you get the duality of background. But really, um, I don't know. Like, I just thought that watching the episode, it was visually spectacular. I got to watch a lot of eye candy, which I can admit it was every bit of a video game in a good way. And you got the conclusion. And I think that for me, it delivered what I wanted to see in the sense that I'm okay that Mando is meandering right now. I'm okay that, like, I don't really know what his purpose is. I don't know. He doesn't have a stated goal like he did in the first two seasons. He doesn't. I don't know why. Like, what's propelling him right now. But I'm okay with that because as long as the Star Wars content is good or entertaining or expands the lore in some way that I can learn something new and unique about Star Wars, then I'm going to support it. So I'll throw it back to you for a response on any of that.
I mean, like, I don't disagree that. So let me caveat this. I don't have a problem with any of the quote unquote storylines. So if the Mandalorian, however improper that name is for a show, given what I'm about to say, may or may not be, if this season is about Bo-Katan's sort of quest to find the Mythosaur and reclaim Mandalore, and ultimately she's going to somehow wield the Darksaber, and like we're going to establish Mandalore as a presence again, cool. I'm fine with that. If you want to have the series or the season revolve around the idea that Grogu is no longer with Luke, he's starting to come into his own. Is he going to be a new type of Jedi? Is he going to be a Jedi? Cool. Like, if you want to have something be like focused on the implication of what does it mean for the Imperial Remnant? Are they going to try to reclone Grogu? Where does all that stand from the last sequence where we saw, Gideon and his like vats of clone troopers his clones and the dark troopers? Cool. The problem is though that and I'll even give them a pass. Like, the episode with Luke and Grogu and Ahsoka and Book of Boba Fett was like, and featuring Din, like, made no sense in that show. Like, they just shoehorned in an episode, and that's okay because, like, again, it is what it is. But for this season in particular, like, there is nothing about this last episode that has convinced me that there's any sort of red thread of a plot line. Like, last episode, we talked about like the Pershing sequence and like how this whole thing about like the potential rebel or Imperial triple agent, like, that's fine. Like, because you kind of know where that's going. There's cloning technology. Is this leading to something deeper? But in this episode, none of that is true. Like, if the focus is going to be on Bo-Katan's story, you're completely right. Like, then we need to have exposition in a campfire sequence. If it's going to be about Grogu kind of, going from level 3 to level 4 because he can unlock his force powers at will, cool. But like, dilly-dallying for 40 minutes with like a pterodactyl that is resolved and contained within its own episode, that to me just like, there's no point to this. Like, I find that very boring, right? Like, even if the kid had been...
Yeah, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here for it. That's why I love it.
You're here to be bored?
No, I'm here. I'm here to see a self-contained Mandalorian fight pterodactyls.
We'll read a comic book. Like, I mean,
I want to see it live action.
No, that's why comic books are constructed the way they are. Like, if you want to contain serial story, fine. But like, this is not HBO, right? Like, this is not Netflix. We don't have 14 episodes at 48 minutes long. You have, like you said, 8 episodes of varying length from 30 minutes to 42 minutes. And as you said, we're already over episode 3. We're approaching the halfway mark. And like, where are we going? And
but what are you worried that we're missing? Okay, you planted the seeds of like a couple of different plot lines, and I think they all exist. I think every one of those is accurate. And you know what? I'm at a Star Wars buffet. I don't want to order off the menu. I want all of it. When I feel like, I want this rare dish that is kind of gross actually, but I'm exotic, like I'll take the Pershing platter. But when I have the Mando munchies and I want to see some dudes light it up, I'm gonna watch this episode. This is one of... I love Andor. I think Andor has been incredible content. We'll do an episode on Andor. And I know you feel the same. Andor doesn't have, to me, episodes that are super enjoyable or have like awesome rewatchability. I don't know how many times I want to rewatch like the first 3 episodes.
Yeah.
This episode of Mando, I'm like, dude, they're blowing stuff up. I don't have to worry. I don't have to be like, oh, what was going on at this point in time? Like what? Like nope. I can just tune in. I can see some cool dudes shooting some guns and blowing up a pterodactyl, and then an alligator crocodile monster eats them. And dude, I know it's guilty. I'm guilty of it. I can't. I cannot. I get it. I get
The
it. Like
problem is, though, the problem with that line of thinking, man, is that you're not like gorging yourself on McDonald's at the buffet. You're just eating oyster crackers. Like you're just filling up on oyster crackers. You're not even touching the other stuff.
but they're the premium oyster crackers. They're the delicious ones that have the extra salt on top.
You're just filling up on them, and it's wasting time. Again, it's just preventing you from getting to like. Nobody's saying you can't enjoy all the things, but what I'm getting at is like, why are you have 8? You have 8 shots to convey a lot of really good content. Why are you wasting a full episode? What is the point of that pterodactyl? What is the point? Like, I don't have to tell you why I think the other.
They're going to feed the mythosaur the babies. No, they're not. They're definitely not going to do that. Not in a Disney World.
Yeah, exactly. But like, explain to me what the line of thinking that you think is when Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau sit down, and Kathleen Kennedy and all the other people, and they decide like, okay, like from a fabric perspective, this is what episode 3 is going to go through. And like, is it that they're so patronizing and think so little of like a fan or a viewer's intellect that they're just like, well, I guess like we're just gonna like wave this like Jurassic Park thing in front of them for 30 minutes and they'll be happy with that. Because like, yeah, man, if I was 9 years old, I would have eaten that shit up too. But like, you can't in this universe go from these, even within the Mandalorian show, there are so many tonal shifts that I just feel like this season is almost like when we first watched Book of Boba Fett. Like suddenly we start with this sort of overarching, really interesting tone and narrative and motif, and then by the end of it, I have like Robert Rodriguez just like playing with his toys in a sandbox, and like a Rancor jumping off buildings and like things blowing up, and like okay, like it's not. I'm not like not fun, dude. I love all of the fun stuff of Star Wars. Like, don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is like nothing that I saw in this last episode was new. Nothing was particularly exciting. I don't think it was particularly well executed, but that's a different story for another day. Like, I've already seen all the colorful Lisa Frank Mandalorian hodgepodge guys that just like.
But do you have the Karopi Hello Kitty special limited edition release?
Side note, like I really wish the costume department like didn't just keep using iterations of Boba Fett's armor and then spray painting him like orange and green, like mismatching.
It looked like a bunch of football teams from like the 60s. You know how they're just like one solid color helmet, a different color jersey.
It's exactly that. Like because Heavy Mando looks pretty distinct from Boba Fett, who looks distinct from Din and even Bo-Katan. But anyways, my point is just to say, like, look, I'm not critiquing like Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau as creators, because I think everything they've done is like almost, we would both agree, like an absolute and utter like net positive for the franchise and for fandom and all that goodness. What I'm just saying is maybe it is because I'm getting old, but like, dude, I have a limited amount of time to watch these shows without kids and distraction and work and life and other things catching up. And so I don't expect to be wowed like every episode. I don't expect every episode to be like the ending of, was it season 2 of Mando where like Luke Skywalker's coming in and blowing up. I get that. Like that's what you build to. I also don't expect a constant like revisiting of Luke Skywalker like we had in Boba Fett, where I was like, oh, this is like really cool and awesome and looks great, and Ahsoka and all that. And she gets her own show. But the showrunners rather need to like strap in and like get real serious, in my opinion, about like what is the arc of Din Djarin and now I guess Grogu. Like, because if it's, I can't tell, and I'll just close here. I can't tell, is this really the Mandalorian, or is this just what we're calling it? And now the focus is really going to be them as supporting characters or deuteragonists at best to Bo-Katan, like reclaiming Mandalore. And like, I don't know. And you're right. Like, I'm not I'm not sitting behind like a crystal ball, but constructively, I would just tell you, like, I stand by my position very firmly that like this episode wasn't just candy. Like it was like crappy wax bottle candy from Halloween that you just like you think you like because you're just chewing on the wax and you're like, oh, this is like kind of good and sugary, but like, yeah, like I've seen it all before, man. There's nothing new that I saw.
Premium Godiva shit. You know it.
It's not Godiva, man.
Look, okay. I get all that. I respect all that. But let me, okay. Andor was 12 episodes and it had 4 arcs. Even though the writers denied it halfway through the show, it was very clear to see that the show had 4 distinct arcs and each one of them lasted precisely 3 episodes. Is that a fair statement? That means that we have 4. It is. I'm not even gonna let you answer.
No,
it means that we have 4. It means we have 4 episodes left of a show that can be just as long, if not longer. That can get us an arc that can bridge us to anything. Like we can have the precursor episode next that sets stuff up, that starts to bring things together, and then a 3 episode arc that can wrap it. And Han Solo can show up. Can show up with surfing with Chewie. And then be like, hey, dudes, let's get some hot dogs.
I would just say
it could totally happen.
It's a false equivalency to talk about the prequels or any show that predates the OT, because unless you really go back like thousands of years to like the old KOTOR era, but I'm talking about like Rogue One, Andor, and even the prequel trilogy. The reason that that's a false equivalency and why those standards are different is because nothing that really happens is of consequence to the narrative of Star Wars. It can have dramatic consequence. Oh my gosh, like yeah, of course it can. That's what you're watching. It's the fabric of the acting and the fabric of the story. But you know what's going to happen. There is no consequence in Andor because I know what's going to happen. Could Stellan Skarsgård die? Yeah, he probably will. And like, could the other characters die? Like, yeah, they probably will. But I also know that
Cassian, we know Cassian's going to.
Yeah, but like we also know in the show that like Cassian is in no danger, and nor is Mon Mothma, because we know we know that she's the head of state. Probably to some extent through Return of the Jedi, and so all I'm saying is like even with the prequel trilogy, like critiques, like I always think people make like a false equivalent. Or there is a false equivalency between comparing it even as like the quality of movie, because like you already know who these characters are, you know what their arcs are, you don't know where they start, but you know where they end. And in this scenario,
and since the Mando's in uncharted territory,
same with Book of Boba Fett, right? Like these things, and truly it was the same with going back to our original critiques. Gosh, I can't believe it's almost been 10 years, but like 8-9 years ago about the opening of the sequel trilogy, right? Like there's a much higher standard to execute when you wipe away existing canon. And now you're saying like, I'm the one tasked with creating the new universe and like I'm orienting you through it. And so I'm willing to drop any preconceived notions I have about what or who Luke should be or who Ahsoka should be, or like whether Mandalore comes to preeminence again. That's fine. Like Disney has every right to like stretch that out and make it their own. But I'm just saying, like, man, we have a limited window, and I don't like. I understand that not everything is neatly resolved at the end of every season. Like that's the whole point, right? Like, case in point, Game of Thrones. But conversely, like, I don't like episodes short of like something really interesting and artistic that has like a point that don't obviously contribute to like the plot of anything. That's my
that's fair. I think Mandalorian has been able to strike to this point in these 4 episodes has been able to strike a healthy balance between what we can call carrying the weight of the lore of the entire franchise versus also progressing as a self-contained story. I think it has to. You can't like it's yes, it's unfair, but it is a reality. But it's unfair that Mandalorian has to carry everything for the franchise because some of the other stuff's failing, and at least in terms of this era, and we'll see for now. But it's I don't know. I liked it, man. I liked it. We could keep going, but we do have to be cognizant of some other stuff we wanted to get to. Did you notice in the flashback? I know most of the fans by the time they listen to this will have known the Easter egg, and they will have said, "Oh, that was really cool that it was the first time that Ahmed Best, came back and reprised a different role in Star Wars and showed his face." But you know what, Jeff? They'd be wrong. You know why? My boy, my boy, Ahmed Beck. This is a shot, and I know you so well that I know what you're already going to say about this picture, but I'm going to let you do it anyways. But this shot is one of Mr. Ahmed Best playing Ahmed Beck in episode 2, in the cantina that Obi-Wan and Anakin follow Zam Wesell into. Jeff, what's the other cool fact about this picture?
Well, that's George Lucas's daughter next
That's right.
to him. She's the Twi'lek that's at the bar, the purple Twi'lek. Yeah, I mean that's no. Ahmed Best is awesome, and I would say that we should actually probably make that a topic for a different podcast.
Yeah, and we have talked about it before in volume 1, folks. We do talk about both Jake Lloyd, but we go into depth with Ahmed Best specifically.
He's a good guy. I follow him on Instagram. He's a really cool person. It's a really interesting and albeit like sad story. And I would say like, as far as like his arc with Jar Jar Binks as the actual actor himself and like kind of what was built to. And so I'm happy to see one thing that I really will give like Disney a lot of credit for. And let me put some context here. I understand this was also like Attack of the Clones. So this was like well before Disney, but
right.
One thing that I think is like really cool is the fact that, to their credit, they're helping sort of I don't know what the right term is, like not endear, but I think a lot of Star Wars fans.
I think that's appropriate, unless you're going
like,
in a different direction.
Yeah, like they're endearing a lot of people that now looking back, we probably like Ahmed Best, Hayden Christensen, others, where you're like, oh, like. I'm good. I'm happy to see him. I'm happy to see that like they made him this awesome like dual saber wielding Jedi awesome fighter, and like he had a cool moment in the sun there too, especially given all the stuff he had to put up with. And I think Hayden has expressed the same sort of like quasi astonishment where he was like, I didn't realize everybody liked me. I always thought everybody kind of hated me, and like that.
And he cites Clone Wars for kind of helping him out quite a bit. He has specifically said it. He's seen all of them.
Yeah, no, there was we won't digress. I won't digress anymore, but I did see a really adorable Instagram clip of like a dad showing his daughter, who's probably like 7 or 8, maybe a little bit younger, one of the Star Wars movies. And it actually might have been episode 3, which is intense to show a kid, but she was like sobbing and he was like, why are you upset? And she's like, I don't want Anakin to become bad. And like, she was like legitimately hurt by it, and I was like, okay, well, they've done their job then, as far as
yeah.
So
I know exactly the video you talk about, and it also reminded me of a video that I'll share with our listeners at some point. I'll put it up on the YouTube at some point, that I took of my daughter explaining to my aunt what happened to Darth Vader, and she was like, the lava hit him, and then he was, but the Emperor saved him, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I always love like the little kid stuff. One other thing I had to get in, Mr. Best also got. I got two more on this. First of all, he got his own toy, Ahmed Beck. It's actually pretty cool because it comes with a really nice cantina piece and like a glass. So if you're into setting up and world building this is the 375 scale. This is what we talked about in our episodes before. Everyone that's listening knows what I'm talking about. But again, if we get super famous or whatever, this is the scale. And then I did like a little bit of, I looked when I was looking for these pictures, I was like, wait a second, Beck, what is that? Why did that sound right? And then I was like, oh, they called that guy Kalarin Beck. And then when I did some research, it turns out Ahmed Best says that the two of them are related.
Oh, nice.
That's very a little tidbit. You know what? I bet this fact is not going to be found in very many of the did you know in the next, like the following day that comes out on these episodes. Like that was a genuine Daniel Press researched fact that I found out and thought was pretty cool. So I'm taking credit for that one.
That's deep. No, that's good, man. Because most of those did you know facts are like they're kind of like Tootsie Pops. Like, of course I knew. Like that's how I react.
Did you know it was Ahmed Best?
Yeah. Like thanks. Of course I knew. Did you know that Harrison Ford was actually a carpenter? And that's how yes, I knew that when I was 9 years old, dude. So yeah, no, that's really cool. And actually looking at this picture, God, this is one of the reasons, and it's I promise I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole right now, but why Star Wars toys are so insane to me that this character who appeared in a cameo sequence, right. It's not just that they made him a figure, that this was mass produced at scale in a factory somewhere with all this really cool artwork on it. I mean, that artwork looks cool. That picture of him looks like it could have been taken from a Decipher card. This is well done. And again, you want to talk about my ultimate dream, man, I would give anything for you and me to be extras in Star Wars, because what that guarantees is extensive character biography, at least a trading card, probably an action figure somewhere down the line. And then all it takes is the old Marvel model of if I can just meet Dave Filoni, then he's gonna be wait, you were this guy, I'm going to bring you back and take you from a double Z lister all the way up to a B+ lister. And so good for Ahmed.
My man.
I'm sure we'll get more from him.
Oh, that would be so cool. Yeah. I don't know. I tried to donate when that was possible, when The Force Awakens was doing that contest for it, Force for Change. I definitely was oh my God, I can do my own. Here we go. Here's some charity dollars. Woo.
Yeah.
So that would be very cool. And I know you would customize a figure if one was not produced. So that'd be amazing. So we took up a lot of time on Mando. It was good stuff, but we took up a lot of time. So I want to go to our bitch, but we're not talking about just the most recent episode or even the most recent couple, because I know you aren't fully caught up, but just the idea kind of Bad Batch generally. Again, it's not something that we've touched on. This will be a short segment, folks. This is the intermediary segment before you then kick off to the end. I don't know what that's called. I'm not in the biz, but I just kind of wanted to talk about it briefly. It starts, it's kind of a continuation of Clone Wars in a way. In an essence, it has some overlap of characters that appeared. In terms of the time frame, it picks up where it left off. What I thought was cool about the show was the pilot episode. I thought that we got the most context behind the transition from the Old Republic into the Empire. And I thought it was pretty cool to see. I thought that the tone of the pilot, and this was an hour 15-minute long pilot, something like that. I thought the tone of it was pretty good. And honestly, at the end of it, I was yeah, this show could be pretty good. I don't know what they're going to spend so much time on, but this could be pretty good. And now that we're more than halfway through season 2, I kind of think that it probably could have been done in maybe 3 hour-long episodes, the whole whatever they're getting to. Look, I kind of enjoy the show. It is what it is. I actually think that some of the more recent episodes have been fairly entertaining and good. There's the episode 12 this season, The Outpost, is particularly good with crosshair focus. But I think just in general, there are too many episodes that I can't even remember what happened, and was definitely not paying attention and definitely looking at my phone. And that's fine. I'm not, this is probably I'm not the target audience, but I kind of am, because this was supposed to be built for the people to continue Clone Wars, and we grew up with, we were on the older end of it, but we grew up with Clone Wars. So the only other thing I'll say, and I'll turn it over to you, Omega's my favorite character. I don't know why. Actually, I do know why. Reason I mentioned earlier, I have a 6-year-old daughter, and there are some just genuinely heartwarming scenes where Omega, gets to be a little girl sometimes and gets that little girl excitement and joy, and it genuinely warms my heart to see some of that stuff. So I like that she's brave and courageous and has that spunk to her. She's a good weapons expert and is pretty awesome at flying apparently now. So that kind of keeps me going on that. And oh my God, her accent. I know everyone's Tiek, Echo, Rika. help me, and like love to make fun of her. But like I genuinely really like the accent. And oh my God, the last name is Ong, but I can't remember her first name that voices it. I'm really sorry. Michelle Ong, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. I like that part. So I'll toss it over to you for some thoughts on Bebech and where am I going? I know that you're not caught up yet though.
We should probably do that thing where like on like Rogan or Howard Stern, where like one of us is like, hey, pull that up, like pull that up really quick, and like we could like look up to see what her name is. That's what I was thinking. Like we should have cross reference here. Yeah, Bad Batch is fine. I don't want to be seen, especially after this episode, as like some pessimist, because that's like, let me just recalibrate here for a minute, guys. Like, I'm not a Star Wars cynic. I'm not a Star Wars pessimist. Oh my God, if you knew how much money alone I spend on this like franchise just as a hobbyist, like please know that like there's nothing but love. It's not a critique of the show. I just felt like it feels a little bit like a GI Joe small soldiers like squad show, right? Like that's what they're going for. There's the specialist. That's cool. Like it doesn't have to be, given its medium, and again the way that those shows are produced versus like a live action show, it's just inherently not going to be held to the same type of standard. So I'm not going to hold it to the same types of judgment either. I think I don't mind it. You were very like on the nose when you made that comment about like not really remembering a lot of what's happened, which is weird because I remember a lot of what happened. I mean, I thought the ending of that last season with like Cad Bane, or like towards the end of that season with Cad Bane and Hunter, and like that whole sequence is like, wow, this is like cool, high stakes. I'm into this.
Yeah.
And I know where they're going, so I get it. Like they're trying to find that arc, right? With like, is there going to be redemption for other fallen brothers? Are they really removed? Is this like driven by ideology and like versus, like that sense of like kinship and camaraderie, and that's cool. Like, Crosshair's sort of like redemption, won't it happen? That's fine. Like I'm into it, I guess. I think for me, my only like caution would be like if they want to continue on the path they're continuing, and to your point, like you have a certain demographic in mind and that's cool, then like that's fine. The only like, it's more of a statement than anything else, it's not even like a warning, would just be as the Star Wars universe like continues to expand, and this is not on Filoni or Favreau, this is the problem that all of creators in the Star Wars universe face and have faced, was that there's almost like this temptation to tie every minor or supporting character back to a core event to bring them legitimacy versus breaking out and doing something on its own. And so the reality is like what the Bad Batch does really has like no effect on anything in Star Wars, and it won't until the point where Filoni decides like, yeah, but like then they're going to be the ones that like leak XYZ to like Cassian, or they're going to be the ones that, there's going to be some like, contrivance of what they do, and that's okay. That's probably what you have to do, right?
I was just going to say that like that's why Rogue One was successful, is because how, like, of course we know what's going to happen. Like how can you connect that to Star Wars to give it broader meaning? Oh, that's how they got the plans. Kyle Katarn wipe notwithstanding, which I know burned you deep.
Well, I would just say I think the original Clone Wars seasons did such an awesome job adding gravitas and drama and stakes. And I think Bad Batch will probably become more topical in my own mind and probably pull me back in once we start to pick off some of these characters, because that's the other thing is like there has to be sacrifice. There has to be some level of like high stakes involved. I'm not going to be interested in the show if all 6 of them, 5, but you know what I mean, 6, like continue along. And it's just like, if there's no, the thing I really liked about Clone Wars too was like, there was always like consequence. We knew how the series ended, or we knew what Order 66 implied, but they also weren't hesitant to like kill characters off too. Like one of those sequences, one of the coolest ones was when they were on Ryloth and I'm a Gundy or whatever, aptly named, like makes that last stand. Like this was like really cool. Like people, and I would just say like any of these shows, man, like I'm not calling for the head of anybody in particular, but like we have to see someone make a sacrifice to really advance it. So I'm hopeful. I am.
Sure. Okay.
The show's
Okay. I like
fun.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There will be some interesting. I think that there may have been some intent on the part of Disney to kind of release Bad Batch and Mandalorian overlapping. Not only is it a nice link for subscriptions, I know HBO is the king of that, but it also, or bridging subscriptions, but it also, they have like cloning elements to both that really are kind of leading us to a path, right? And I don't want to go too deep because I know we have, if we get to that path, I know you're going to have some strong opinions on it. I don't know that that's, I think that they're setting up cloning interestingly. I think that there's some angles that they're exploring that are interesting. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that they're trying to link or build up the sequel trilogy. I think that there might be some other things going on. That's a little tease for another. We'll have an episode on speculation because there's not always, we're going to try to do weekly episodes and there's not going to be new content every week. So we're gonna have to we're gonna have to come up with something to talk about. So we'll pick it up there. Any last thoughts, or you want to move on to interdictors?
No, I'm good to
Cool.
move over to interdictors. I guess I would just say on that front too. I was curious to know why you chose Imperial Interdictors, the ship itself. I don't know. Would I classify it? I guess I wouldn't classify this as a capital ship because what it really is more of like a, they don't use the right term, so it's not technically a destroyer because that's what a star destroyer is, but it's really more of a, in the context of like modern militaries and navies, it would be more akin to a destroyer. I guess like a cruiser is probably like the better term for it, even though it is technically a star destroyer. But I was just interested to see why you chose, of all of the ships, I mean it's a very cool pull from the quote unquote essential guides. I mean it's technically canon too, but yeah,
Right. Yeah.
Interested to see why.
Really, there was not much more than the fact that it actually, on the cover of the Essential Guide to Vehicles and Vessels, it is touching a sandcrawler. There is a picture on the cover, and it is being overlaid by a sandcrawler. I thought it was very appropriate to bring it up on the cast. Again, I want to do kind of a series where maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 15, maybe 25, whatever, depending on how unique or interesting the topic is or the subject is, to just kind of talk about the deeper roots of Star Wars, the lore of Star Wars. We have friend of the show Austin let us know that he learned a whole lot about Duros and Duro in the previous episode. So we kind of want to keep that rolling with just, we'll talk about surface level stuff, and there's a time to dig a little bit deep. I'm not saying that we're going to dig super deep, but I thought I'd pick the interdictor. It comes up a lot in some of the content that I really like. So they use it a lot in Rebels. It comes into play in the X-Wing novels, again rebranded as Rogue Squadron. So there's a lot of different uses for them. So again, I'll turn it over to you, but the basic use for them is these are ships, and you can see they kind of have the 4 bubbles on them. So for our folks that are listening, they basically look like, take an Imperial Star Destroyer, the cheese wedge ship, if you will, take the little 2 balls off the top, slice them in half, and then put them kind of on the hull of the ship and squish it a little bit. And then they have 4 on the bottom as well. But they otherwise kind of look the same. And their basic purpose, and we'll get nerdy with you in a little bit, but their basic purpose is to be able to pull ships out of hyperspace that are in hyperspace, so very fast light speed travel, and also to prevent ships that are in real space from going to hyperspace. So Jeff, any little tidbits, anything interesting that you that you like about the interdictor?
I thought it was cool because it was always the ship that was meant to kind of go not head to head, but like those ships were they were trying to be hero killers, as I recall. Like, so the idea was that like Rogue Squadron, especially commanded by Wedge, was really like this super elite fighting force of, again, rebel craft, predominantly X, Y, and A, some B wings, but like that. Traditionally, like the rebel ships had always fared very well against Star Destroyers. Like they'd sort of figured out the weakness. If you look at like the Battle of Endor, for example, they had like a pretty good amount of success in figuring out, sort of the weaknesses of those Star Destroyers. Rebel capital ships kind of had figured it out. And to your point, like the Dominator was more of like a true offensively minded ship that could stand up to something like Rogue Squadron. But like to your point, it could also pull in using that gravity well technology, other ships. They were always classified as somewhat less common than like the big Imperial ships of the day, but they were definitely used pretty extensively as, again, like a nice tactical thrust to counter sort of the rebel hit and run, and also just like more robust fighter fleet. Because again, like the Imperials they always relied on like mass numbers, right? Like whether it was a TIE fleet or a TIE swarm of regular TIE fighters all the way down to like TIE interceptors and like the sort of poorly defended or defensive TIE bombers. Like they needed something that could actually like withstand and go toe to toe with the rebel ships. So like, again, pretty cool that I always thought they had an interesting role. We never got to see, and that's, you talking about them is like all the more reason I really need to go back and like read some of these books, because there's a lot of really cool, as I think, story and context around just like the ship to ship fighting. There's a series of and I'm blanking on the name, but there's a series of British naval books. Master and Commander is the one that was like most notable because they adapted it into a movie, and some others by Patrick O'Brien is the author. But like so much of those was about explaining like Dreadnought class and like all these different like French like ships and how they interacted with each other. And I feel like that's probably where the X-Wing books go into detail. So all that to say, like they're really interesting ships. Again, not really capital ships, but they look cool. And again, I thought the purpose of them obviously is more than just a plot device. Like there's so many cool and also not cool ships that exist in the Imperial catalog, especially back to the essential guides, like to where everything was either just a variant of a Star Destroyer, or for whatever reason, like they made like TIE tanks because they thought TIE was like the only type of Imperial ship. And like there's a TIE fighter with like treads that just like goes around on the ground. You're like, wait, what? Like, so anyways, all that to say, I thought they were really cool. Sometimes when I like read about these ships and I look at the numbers that it takes to like populate those ships, like the
Oh my God,
roles, you're like, I can't even like quantify. There was one time that I was reading about, maybe we talked about it at one point, but like there's a discrepancy as to like how long Star Destroyers actually are, because like from a perspective they vary, and like how the executor is like, or executor, I never know if it's executor or executor, but how like that
executor ship, but
executor, executor felt more on brand, but
it does, but it's technically executioner and executor, like he's the executive, blah blah whatever.
But like how the executor is like a 40-mile long ship, and you're like, what? Like, like okay. So anyways, all that to say, like I liked some of the stuff that's a little bit more palpable, as far as like, okay, like not to say that these ships could be created, or like I think I read somewhere we were talking that like to create one Imperial Star Destroyer, like in today's terms, would require not only like every resource on Earth, but would require like a harnessing of like like all resources from the solar system in one. So it's cool though to see like, again, more tactically oriented sort of battleships versus things that are just so like inconceivably large, like the second Death Star.
Right. No, I love that. I love that angle. A couple of things about this Sinar Fleet Systems ship is so Sinar Fleet. Jeff mentioned this in our previous episode. Sinar is one of the big three producers of ships in general. It's again like the Raytheon or Boeing or whatever Honeywell that you want to, whatever you want to call it, for military contracting and construction. It's privatized, but they sell to government and militaries. The Sinar Fleet System specifically is responsible for the TIE bomber, the TIE defender, the TIE fighter, TIE interceptor. So all of the TIEs except the TIE crawler. Actually, this is legit. This is legit. It was Santha and Sinar Technologies, an offshoot of Sinar Fleet Systems, that made the TIE crawler. Go figure. At any rate, God, that was a nerd bomb. At any rate,
the TIE crawler is the dumbest ship I've ever seen.
it is so stupid. It's like, can we take the worst part tactically from the TIE fighter and then also put it in a tank? But anyways, what I think is pretty cool, it makes sense that this ship was made. It was produced a couple of years before the events of A New Hope. And so the purpose behind it, like you had said, was, again, there were rebel strikes. It was to combat and counter. But, as the Empire, they're big, they're a huge fleet. They want to be stationed everywhere and be there permanently. So it's always good. And rebels being a more of a guerrilla tactic folk, it was good to have someone that could prevent, or a ship that could prevent escape, right? So the rebels risked more. They couldn't just show up, bomb a whole bunch, and jump to hyperspace and unscathed. So the Empire needed something to combat that. They could also station them near trade routes and just randomly pull people that were hauling cargo on one of the trade routes. And then there was a couple of other tactical uses. So there's something called the Thrawn Pincer, which you could have a starship be really far away, a friendly starship really far away, and you could use the interdictor to project a gravity well, which is what pulls something out of hyperspace. And so your companion ship, usually a Star Destroyer, can make like a micro hyperspace jump and be pulled out by the interdictor without risking hitting a ship or coming up in the wrong spot. So it's like it doesn't just stop enemies, it can also stop friends. Another use for it was when Coruscant was being captured by the rebels in old canon. So in Legends, they had they had actually had a defected interdictor ship on their side, whose purpose was, in case the shields for Coruscant weren't down, it was the interdictor's job to pull the fleet out of hyperspace so they wouldn't be totally destroyed by the orbital defenses. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, there's some strategic use behind it. And then, of course, like the most that we get out of it in real consumable or digestible content is in Rebels, when the Rebels are able to escape Atollon because a Imperial interdictor decides to go rogue and engage the enemy and go against Thrawn's orders. So they were able to have a quick window to hyperspace and save the rebellion. So that's it. Interdictor ships. We'll come up with more nerdy stuff. That was quite a bit right there. But Jeff, any closing thoughts on?
They're definitely gonna. I had to refresh my memory with the Disney canon because I'm not as up to date with it as I was like the old Legend stuff. But having read that Kira from Solo, like knowing that was her ship, that the Crimson Dawn had like broken away and had theirs. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that we're going to see that ship probably appear in some. We've seen it already in some.
Well, it's in Andor, right? Like they have an iteration of it in Andor potentially, or that might have been a comm ship that had interdictor capabilities that had to be destroyed. Something about that.
I mean, her ship.
Oh, like, yeah, sure.
Or something. But yeah, like it's cool. It's very cool. Well, I think that the most untapped sequence in Star Wars, and it tends to be the most overlooked, even though it's top of mind for everybody, is always vehicles. Like, if you saw an X-Wing or a TIE fighter, or even a Star Destroyer, like what media that's from. And it's interesting because, again, like that well goes so deep, especially in the old expanded universe. But even now, I mean, there's plenty of content. So I do like talking about this stuff, and I'm glad we got to talk about, what was it called? The TIE Crawler? Is that how I remembered it too?
The TIE Crawler.
I remember seeing that in like 6th grade in that book and being like, this is the stupidest looking thing I've ever laid eyes on. I could like blow it up with my car today. I could just like run into it.
Yeah. No kidding. No joke. You don't want to really have that kind of TIE windshield on a
On a
freaking
tank.
tank. It's not wise.
Turns out you put a lot of armor on tanks on the front and the sides, and even to some extent the back, but not a giant glass window.
Kind of my thinking, but hey,
Yeah.
look, it was a crazy time. It was a crazy time. We'll give everybody a pass that was making stuff. There's some good. The Interdictor is a pretty cool ship, so I'll give them the TIE Crawler. It was an offshoot. It was an unsuccessful subsidiary of Sinar Fleets, Jeff. They went out of business, so no surprise.
All good.
Can you imagine? And then we can wrap. But can you imagine? Like, I keep reading in the X-wing books. They're like, oh yeah, TIE pilots. The TIE ships don't have any shields, and we've talked about it in the video games episodes and stuff. Like, can you imagine being a TIE pilot, being like, oh, so our lifespan is 1.3 missions? Oh, cool. Like,
What?
I'm a veteran if I've made it to 3 missions. What?
That's like crazier than I might hesitate to say this fact because like I don't remember the specifics, but that's like akin to World War One flyers where they were like, you average like you won't even make it to ace with 5 kills because you'll probably only last like 2.5 missions before you get shot down. It's like, wait, what? Like, I don't really want to do that. I don't know why anybody would like want to do this unless they're just like zealots. But I felt like a lot of those Imperial pilots like generally weren't. That's something we should talk about in another episode. Is sort of what I think is like this weird inconsistency of how TIE pilots or Imperial pilots are portrayed, because they're either portrayed as, like, to your point, like these like disposable characters, or I always think about this, man. Sorry, I will shut up after this.
No.
I always think about this, like how, like you have to be really good, but you have to be really good just to stay alive. And I think about, for some reason, those poor Imperial pilots that like follow Han Solo into the asteroid field, and those guys are pulling off like crazy maneuvers, and like they're doing so good. Like they must have been so epic and like awesome in their own right. And like it's only by sheer circumstance. Like, what did they think? They were just following like some big YT freighter.
Dude, not Bill. He was a week away from retirement. Nobody's made it.
Yeah, and then like just totally like eats it when like he goes like head first into an asteroid, and you're like, oh man, like what an unceremonious way to go out.
Yeah.
And like I don't know why that bothers me, but you have guys like Baron Fell in the expanded universe who are supposed to be like these absolute wizards, and you're like, well, are they respected or are they not? Anyways, that's not for this episode, but I think about that a lot. Weird things like this are what keep me up at night. So
well, love it. So folks, finally, we're on to the giveaway part. This is the shortest segment of the show. Follow us on Instagram at the Sandcrawler Podcast. It's one word. There's no underlines. There's no anything. The Sandcrawler Podcast on Instagram. We are on YouTube. You're probably watching this on YouTube. I actually noticed that we had fewer listeners for our second episode, but more YouTube watchers. And I only accounted for about half of them. So that's pretty good. We're moving on up the ranks. Because of that, and because I was able to get so many sandcrawlers from this eBay seller, I want to keep the giveaway rolling. So, new code word for this week. Also, if you have entered already and I have either indicated that you've won or you have received your sandcrawler, please don't enter. I know who you are. But if you have not and you're listening to this episode, code word Omega. Omega. It is Michelle Ong, by the way. I was right. Boom.
You can spell it Omega, Omega, or you can spell it Omega, Omeega. Both will be accepted.
we will accept both spellings, phonetic and literal. Yeah, that's the one. Actual, I don't know. Anyways, we will be happy to do that. Still keeping it in the US. Again, I'm not shipping to Tahiti unless I'm going there on vacation. I will gladly take a couple with me. Jeff, I'm going to let you close us out.
Yeah, I thought this was good, and I would just tell our listeners again, at the end of the day, not every episode, that it's almost impossible for us to find a point of clash between the two of us. We felt like this was warranted to have a little bit of a crossfire style debate. And so again, please know that it's not always just ever going to be two fanboys arguing with each other, because this was the first time I think there's ever been a true divergence in our opinion on Star Wars. Felt like it needed to be documented, at least historically, even if nobody's listening to this, for the two of us, since we talk about Star Wars literally nonstop. So I would just caution everybody to say, hope you enjoyed it, but certainly there won't be that level of excitement and clash going forward as it pertains to our love or our disappointment or our cynicism or even our critique of the Star Wars media. All that to say, next time we will hopefully in a few listens, Daniel, I know we're working to get onto their streaming platform services as well, like Spotify and Apple. Those take a little bit more time, but should be all good. And again, we welcome your feedback. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you didn't like. If you don't like my voice, I'm sorry, it's how it is. I'll try to be deeper. If you don't like the way Daniel talks, tell us. We'll work on it.
I'll wear a voice modulator. I'll do it if you'll listen.
I'm gonna talk like Ned from South Park. Oh my god! But also, what I would say too is, if you have any ideas or suggestions for us, they're welcome. We will try to get some guests on that are actually tied to the Star Wars universe. I'm not going to reveal any names or any ideas, but Daniel and I both have some contacts, and we think that would be pretty cool too. So again, if you're interested, critiques, comments, always welcome. If they're really harsh critiques, I'll just tell you we probably won't care, because I think we're both just arrogant enough when it comes to our fandom that I'll let it slide off my back. But we do appreciate you listening, and we appreciate you tuning in. And I'll go ahead and Daniel, I would leave everybody with the fact that I am hopeful and I'm excited for what comes in the Star Wars fandom. We have a couple of topics that we're really excited to talk to you about, and we thank you for your time. So may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you.